Florida, and I'm a sixth generation Gullah Geechee descendant. Grew up in Central Florida, but have been in Jacksonville for about 25 years now. So I'm one who can actually say Duval if you if you ever heard that saying before. So to get started, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items about our lunch and learn today. Number one, we will be recording today's session for those who can't join us live. So they'll be able to view today's presentation at a later date via our YouTube channel. And as we go through the presentation, please remain muted until the end. And if you have any questions, you will have an opportunity during the Q&A session, which will take place later during the presentation. You'll also be more than welcome to type in your questions into the chat at any time, and then we will get to as many questions as we can as possible. Second, today's Lunch and Learn offers 1 hour AIA and APA continuing education credits. So all AIA members, please put your name and AIA member number in the chat before today's presentation ends to receive attendance credit. By the same approach, all APA members feel free to do the same. So, if most of you already don't know Derek, he is the planning director for the city of St. Petersburg here in Florida. Derek has co-authored the city's award-winning land development regulations in the early 2000s and has complementary experience in site and landscape plans and permitting, zoning, and future land use, historic preservation, and sustainability. Prior to joining Florida's Sunshine City in 2000, uh, David, I mean, Derek, sorry about that, worked for the city of Temple Terrace, which is just north of Tampa. He is a native of Buffalo and graduated from SNUY College of Environmental Science and Forestry and attended the SNUY at Buffalo School of Architecture and Planning for graduate study. He lives in St. Petersburg with his wife and two children. So, Derek, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you for joining us today.
All right, Ennis, thank you for that great introduction. And thank you, everyone, for attending this Lunch and Learn presentation today. Hopefully, we've put together some really useful and constructive information for you. I also want to thank the Florida Trust for inviting me and trusting me to do this for you all today. And finally, as you heard in the introduction, I came into historic preservation through city planning. So I also want to just thank Kim Hinder and Amy Angel, Laura Duvacott, Kelly Perkins, and Cindy Kohanek. These are all historic preservationists. Some of you know them because they serve or have served on the Florida Trust Board. These individuals have all been very instrumental in helping me learn up on historic preservation. I imagine that some of the individuals here too also are planners that are tasked with doing historic preservation tasks. I have several inspirations for putting this together for the conference this year. The first motivation for doing this was obviously in historic preservation, we talk about historic designations and they're complicated and they're very difficult to do. So for me, my approach to historic preservation here in St. Petersburg is always trying to identify other programs or initiatives that are not designation related. How do we expand the audience and give people choices to engage with historic preservation issues that are separate from designations? If somebody has a concern or don't necessarily support, let's say, third-party designations, for example, we might be able to get them excited and engaged in something else. So I approach this presentation from that place. The second motivation is that I grew up doing competitive dance. And in competitive dance, dance studios are very great at teaching you and preparing you to be a performer. But what they don't do a very good job at is teaching you all the other professions that relate to dance so that when you move out of college that there is a way for you to stay engaged in that world professionally through other endeavors or careers. And so when I think about historic preservation, I also think, are we doing the things necessary to inspire people into preservation-related jobs or positions that aren't necessarily just pure historic preservation work? And then finally, I am married to a marketing professional. So when I'm thinking about historic preservation, I think about all the boring stories that my wife has listened to about city planning. But I want her to know, and I want you to know that I'm always listening to her marketing suggestions and strategies. So to the extent that that can be a way that we think about and approach these issues too, that was the third motivation for how I constructed this presentation. You'll see on the slide right now on the screen a QR code and a short URL. I think these materials will be provided to you through the Florida Trust. You can also access them through the City of St. Petersburg Share Drive link. So that is where that QR code and short URL will take you. At the Florida Trust Conference this year, Laura Bessinger, she did talk a lot about marketing, and Rick Gonzalez talked about architectural schools, and some schools not even teaching traditional architecture these days. So if you attended the conference this year, the sessions that were presented there, I think align with the motivations and direction I was trying to go with this conference session when I presented it. So let's work through here and we'll try to answer your questions at the end then. As we kind of go through this presentation, we're going to identify some different things and strategies that we're implementing here in St. Petersburg and hope that they are constructive tools and resources you can take back for your work. In the presentation itself, we also have activated links. So if you see something that is interesting and you have the presentation, you should be able to click in and then access related information that way. So we really tried to set this up as a resource tool for you to use after today is done. Okay, first thing that we look at in St. Petersburg that is not necessarily designation related is subdivision gateways. We have several in the city. This is an example of one subdivision gateway. It's out in a neighborhood called Pasadena Bear Creek. And it's very much in this form today. If you go out and look at it, it was actually recently designated at the interest of the neighborhood and neighborhood association. But this is an example of something unique in our community that generates a lot of questions. It generates some calls to our office. What is this thing? So to the extent that you can identify these in your own community, start to pull together some history and tell a story. In addition to just doing that and telling the story, for example, on this, here's another example from a neighborhood in St. Pete called Broadwater. And if you research this neighborhood, it's a subdivision that was developed in the 1960s. You'll notice that all the original advertising materials oftentimes didn't even use a street address. It just used this reference to turn in at the wrought iron gate. So this was a motto. It was an advertising campaign for the neighborhood. And it doesn't really make much sense until you understand that there was this iron gate at the entrance off 34th Street South. Now, unfortunately, this gateway was removed in the late 90s. And you can see it doesn't have high architectural interest, but it is important to the original history of the neighborhood. And if the residents understood that relationship, they may have thought about it differently before choosing to remove it. So this is the kind of focus that we try to take on here is, can we help connect these assets, these historic assets on some emotional level that the residents themselves are inspired to protect them in a way that city or municipal staff cannot or are challenged in doing. In St. Petersburg, we have a great collection of neighborhood associations. Oftentimes, they are managing their subdivision sections and they have these historic, very creative subdivision signs. Here's an example of one from Northeast Park Shores. And so, again, making this emotional connection, how do we activate our residents into wanting to understand more about these unique things and then working to protect them? So, in the case of subdivision signs, a number of years ago, we put together a proposal that we then pitched to our neighborhood services office. And the proposal here was to first activate the neighborhood associations to photo document all of these subdivision signs throughout the city so that our historic preservation office can archive those photos and have a great record or collection of these throughout the city, but also engage them in a way that this was, for example, some type of grant contest. So as the photos were collected by the residents and then submitted to the city through our neighborhood association, we would do a subdivision grant to restore some of these signs. Now, when we pitched this idea in 2022, there was already a grant that had been requested for this sign, Sun Haven, from this neighborhood subdivision. And so this particular idea hasn't evolved to a standalone initiative yet. But I included in this presentation because you can see when this neighborhood applied for the matching grant program, I've highlighted here, this is exactly what they said in the application. Will bring much pride to the immediate neighborhoods as well as distant heights, in addition to restoring a unique collection of mid-century architecture and craftsmanship. So this is showing us as preservationists how the residents can be activated and excited to work on these projects that they probably don't perceive to be historic preservation related, but is very much historic preservation related. It is telling this mid-century story of St. Petersburg. Another way that we do that here in St. Pete is through a historic signs initiative. So in this example here, you see these are several pictures. The center picture is outside St. Petersburg, but is in Pinellas County. This demonstrates the different signs that have unique artistry and craftsmanship from the mid-century. So rather than have these be landmark designations, the city developed a Signs of Historic Significance program to capture and inventory these signs throughout the city, research those signs to then put together a guide or document explaining the history of sign design and construction in St. Pete, and then create a Signs of Historic Significance section in our sign ordinance that exempts these signs from nonconformity prohibitions and allows them to continue to be restored, operated, and even relocated, so that these signs are being preserved long term. And we have had some great success with this program. For those of you who are familiar with St. Petersburg, we have a large rotating globe that used to be part of a furniture store and has since been relocated to a location just a block away on Central Avenue and 16th Street. But we have had some great success with the Signs of Historic Significance program that is not a landmark designation. It's an incentive-based program. And for those of you who are interested in historic signs, the document itself that's linked here has some really great history on just sign design and construction. I would encourage you to check that out. Okay, what you're seeing on the screen now is St. Petersburg used to have a historic trolley network. And so we digitized that network. It doesn't exist anymore, but we wanted to create this interactive feature for people to see where the trolley lines used to exist. And then we have discussed coming up with some type of sign program so that you can see here, this is Photoshopped. We haven't done this yet, but this would create finials on road signs to label the different trolley lines that ran through the city's older historic neighborhoods. And we think that's important because people will see that and they will start to ask themselves, well, what is this historic coffee pot line that I see on the sign? And it might inspire them to learn more, and it will also help them understand their neighborhood a little bit better. So this picture here is on a historic trolley line. When you move through the historic Old Northeast neighborhood, there is a collection of these multifamily buildings immersed within what is otherwise a very standard single-family neighborhood with ADU. So why are these multifamily buildings where they're located? And if you know the trolley network historically, you understand why these buildings are located where they are. So we're telling the history of the city's development, but we're again connecting with people on an emotional level. They're understanding more about their individual neighborhood, and that is going to make them advocates and partners for us when bigger, more consequential preservation decisions need to be made. Traditional streetscapes is another opportunity that we saw in the city that doesn't involve designation of private property. In this case here, we have an excellent collection of hexagon block sidewalks, brick streets, and granite curbs. And so we set out to um, preserve those through our streetscape standards. And I love using this photograph in presentations. In St. Petersburg, Farmer Concrete Works was the predominant manufacturer of these hex block pavers. This shows that the entire community was involved in this very important historic material and work that we see commonly throughout our older traditional neighborhoods today. We also have a great collection of brick streets. We have over 80 miles, linear miles of brick streets still in the city, and those brick streets are often framed with granite curbs. So why is that important? How does that inspire people to do bigger things? On the screen here, you see there's a dissertation cover page from Laura Duvcott. Laura was a resident here in St. Petersburg. She was inspired into studying historic preservation. She left for a couple years to go to University of Georgia, and she wrote her dissertation on brick streets in Florida because of her experience here with brick streets in St. Petersburg. And then Laura eventually graduated and joined our historic preservation team here at the city and was a wonderful asset for us until she moved to the West Coast. But an example where somebody living here was inspired by this very small detail to do something bigger. And on the right side of the screen, this video is activated in the presentation deck. This year, we had somebody apply for an arts grant to create a documentary on the history of brick streets in St. Petersburg. So again, this is a historic preservation outcome. It's a great source that we love to have and add to our library, but it was received through a arts grant, not a historic preservation grant. And it's because of the video. Now, all of that is coded in our city code. So in this case, we do have a regulation about the maintenance and removal or prohibition against removal of hex block pavers, brick streets, and granite curbs. So the example is linked here, and we can answer those questions later if you have them. The city code doesn't cover everything. And here in St. Pete, we have a historic subdivision, Pinellas Point, that was developed with this very unique concrete die. It's locally known here as the pink streets. And in this case, the pink concrete is protected through language in our utility agreements with utility companies. So if utility companies are doing work that involves these roadways, and they're pulling up concrete, they are required to replace the concrete with the dye color that is managed by our stormwater, pavement, and traffic operations office. But if you don't have code regulation, another way to approach this is through utility agreements with franchises who are providing infrastructure services. So we included that here as a notable addition. Celebrating architects is another way to do this. So this is a picture of Sanford Goldman, who is a resident of St. Petersburg. Unfortunately, Mr. Goldman passed away last year, but Goldman was a resident apprentice of Frank Lloyd Wright at Taliesin, returned to St. Petersburg, and then conducted his career here in St. Pete. The house in the lower left is an example of one of his designs here in St. Pete. When we were introduced to Sanford Goldman, approximately 2017, 2018, we saw an opportunity to, again, advance the preservation conversation in an exciting and interesting way that did not involve designation. So we set up a proclamation through the city and through the mayor's office to celebrate and honor Sanford Goldman's many contributions here in St. Pete. Now, we were trying to honor the person because we really enjoyed the relationship we had built with him over that year, a couple of years. But we were also able to help him curate his collection of all of his resources and materials. So we were connecting or trying to connect with the University of Florida so that his resources could be curated and then permanently stored at the University of Florida. But the other advantage was when we did this proclamation, the Tampa Bay chapter of the AIA really promoted this and had our city council chamber full of architects throughout the region who were coming to honor Mr. Goldman and his career and success. So again, celebrating the architects who are the people that we need to do the work, rally people to the issues that we talk about. Okay, currently we work with this architect, Alex Smith. He's an architect that has a company, lives in one of our National Register and local districts, Kenwood. I included this slide because I think it's really important to point out, and I highlighted a couple sections here. This is from his company page. He included a comment from a customer, and I highlighted putting together a package for review by the city of St. Petersburg and his knowledge in both dealing with the city and historic architectural details. This customer had an excellent experience living in their historic district because the architect they hired and that we routinely work with understood the process. The process went really smooth. They got timely responses and their permits were issued. And this resident had a great experience. So to the extent that you can work with the local architects, we're creating positive experiences for the residents. If the architects don't understand the designation process, or the COA process, I should say, then that resident is probably going to have a more complicated experience with the city, and we're going to lose them as a cheerleader. They're going to talk about their bad experience, even though the historic preservation part isn't the reason that they had a bad experience. So talking to those architects, building those relationships is really important. Also, how do we cross-promote with, I'm always thinking, how do we cross-promote with other divisions and agencies and initiatives in the city? This is a subdivision that was designed and developed by Glenn Johnson. It's called formerly Visionaire. You can see on the screen here, they were promoting sustainable development practices in the 1960s. So some of you may be familiar with the references to the famous birdcage houses in St. Petersburg. This is part of that collection. This is part of those birdcage houses. But here, they were intentionally developing sustainable practices into the architecture. And there are opportunities here to cross-promote in April around Earth Day when our sustainability office is doing something. This is how we can be part of that conversation. Okay, we have subdivisions, subdivision names. We have a subdivision in St. Pete called Allendale Neighborhood. Do the residents in Allendale know why their subdivision is called Allendale. Well, it's called Allendale because of Cade Allen's development of that neighborhood. Now, in this particular case, we are really grateful that descendants of his family have put together 2 volumes of his work here in St. Pete. Um, but again, what is the story of a particular neighborhood subdivision? Is it just a name that we can research and help people understand and connect to where they live better? This is an example of a Cade Allen design that he built in St. Petersburg. It was, a unique mix of different styles and materials, but it was distinctively a Cade Allen design. So to the extent that we can teach our residents what this means, some of them will be inspired to come forward and designate these buildings because they're motivated by knowing the story and the people behind the story. And that's where those 2 volumes prepared by his family are great because it just connects us to that family in a way beyond the building. Design styles. This is a pinwheel that we have in our design standards that teaches us about the time period of different styles that were predominantly seen in St. Petersburg. Can we translate this great graphic into residents learning more? We've tried. So this goes back to COVID. Some of you may remember during COVID time, there were these neighborhood initiatives called bear hunts. People were putting stuffed bears in their front window, and the idea was you'd walk around the neighborhood and look for these hidden bears. So building off that theme, we had come up with this concept to create these printables that could be used in combination with the design guidelines. So through our neighborhood associations, we would communicate to the residents, get them to go into the design guidelines, learn about the style of their home, then use these printables from our marketing department to post in their front window, and then encourage the neighborhood associations themselves to come up with different games or activities involving getting out on the street, walking around, and learning about these styles in their neighborhoods. And so an extension of that would be similarly using the neighborhood associations to communicate with the residents and get them out on the street to just photo document and help us archive things that Google Street View isn't always going to grab. So in this example, here are several garage doors from our historic Kenwood neighborhood again. Some really awesome examples here to see, but it also starts to teach us other things. So if you move through Kenwood, you're seeing these great historic doors. We're photo documenting and archiving them in our office. Maybe the neighborhood associations creating related games and activities. But we can also start to see the emergence of particular predominant styles, like these 2 doors here. So we're learning academically on our end as preservationists, but the neighborhood is engaged and excited because they're doing and learning these fun things that didn't occur to them before. So I'll just shoot through a couple more here. We have very unique concrete cast shutters or stucco cast shutters here in the city. And so similar to, garage doors, we could do, or you could do unique shutter collections. Are there building materials? Here's a permastone building from in the city. Are there collections like this in your own community that you could isolate and turn into specific activities? Heritage trails, this is a more traditional concept. Landscapes, I think, are also important to creating a connection to place. So many of you may be familiar with the Driftwood neighborhood here in St. Petersburg. These are just a couple photos showing it's landscape-based, not building-based, but still very relevant to the history of the city. This is an example of a famous, I'll say now famous tree in St. Pete. It's maturing into legendary status, but this is in a local historic district. It's in a National Register district, Granada Terrace. But it drives major traffic to this address in the springtime when it blooms. And so you can see there's news stories about it. Don't miss these opportunities to also cross promote. So when this tree is blooming and the news is talking about it, it's a great time to also connect and share related historic stories about the neighborhood. So to the extent that you can do that. Similarly, we have something in St. Pete called night blooming cirrus. These bloom one night a year, and this has really developed its own social media campaign and everything. So residents will now coordinate through this centralized site. They are tracking the calendar. They're giving other people countdowns with addresses saying, hey, this is going to bloom in 2 nights or 3 nights. And again, it's driving traffic, in this case, to the historic Old Northeast or North Shore National Register District. A relationship using something other than buildings to tell historic stories. This is my family, by the way. This is my wife and my son and my daughter in this picture from last year. Okay, are there unique businesses that we can celebrate? In this case here for St. Petersburg, one of those is Mazzaro's Italian Market, is very famous store and market here. Drives a lot of traffic. This kind of gets you into a legacy business discussion. And again, not designation related, but it is celebrating these legacy businesses that have contributed to the long history of your place. In this particular case, Legacy Business Program, this is something that the Historic Preservation Office did propose many years ago. I want to say back in 2018, we had proposed a Legacy Business Program through our Economic and Workforce Development Department and our Greenhouse Small Business Division. Unfortunately, at that time, we weren't able to get them to pick this up as an initiative. But we did continue to do the research, and so we worked with the local chamber. We had an individual in the community who ran what itself was a legacy business, civil and survey company, who was inspired by the work. And this individual himself was approximately 80 years old. He took it upon himself to communicate and contact all the people that he knew and grew up with to assemble a list of legacy businesses that met the criteria we had put forth. So again, just having it in the background, talking about it when we can, connected with somebody. And that somebody then became a huge benefit to us because they used resources we'll never tap into. And it took a long time, but the Economic Workforce Development Department launched this program just this year. And so it was released and advertised as an economic development program, not a historic preservation program, but that's okay. At the end of the day, we got the outcome that we were looking for. We have this new initiative and program that connects people to historic resources in the city. And I think that's an important takeaway is these things will eventually happen. You might not get credit for it, but if the outcome is productive, it's okay. And we can continue to work on the sideline or in the background and help support these programs going forward. So I've combined it with this slide here to show you another way that you can celebrate preservation in your community. Who are the non-traditional preservationists? They didn't go to preservation school. They don't work in city planning. They have no idea what they're doing is important preservation work. A number of years ago, we pitched a similar idea here for Preservation Month. What we were recommending to the marketing department was they do a 5-week social media campaign. Each week, they feature one individual associated with a preservation business or nonprofit organization here in St. Pete. So who's the woman-owned business that runs a firm that does large-scale masonry preservation work and is headquartered in downtown? Who's the small business individual that runs a local wood window restoration company? who runs the local nonprofit for historic preservation work here, Preserve the Burg in St. Pete. And so we had a list of recommendations. Um, Unfortunately, that was not taken up as a preservation campaign. But several months later, this did pop up on the city's social media channel celebrating Public Works Week. And you can see here is a very similar concept. But I think it's really important here because these public works individuals are the ones who are out in the field fixing the brick roads, fixing the granite curbs, maintaining the hex block sidewalks. So at first I was a little bitter that this idea kind of was taken from historic preservation and executed in a different way. But I'm really excited about it now because it's getting these individuals excited who don't see themselves as preservationists or historians. We're showing them, hey, you are doing important preservation work. Keep it up. And if you can celebrate these individuals in your community too, they take ownership over what they're doing and they'll work for us because we can't do everything. Especially in the municipal role, there's a lot of expectations on us to do a lot of things, and we just can't do all that. Okay, so I'm talking a lot about how do we empower and activate our residents. So I thought it would be appropriate to run through some resources. Here in the city, we had our marketing team did a Live Local series where they featured people related to these individual neighborhoods, many of which are historic. And so these are people, human interest stories. These get clicks, and more importantly, people share them. Hey, you should check out this video. The city featured me in this video. They're sharing it to their social media, and this is how the word is getting out. Are you mapping out your historic surveys and giving the community access to all that great cultural, architectural, historic survey information and background work? This is a great resource for realtors, homeowners, neighborhood associations. It's already done. In some cases, the work is already done. They just don't know it's out there, whether it's surveys or it's Florida Master site file forms, or it's in your design guidelines. These resources are great assets to get people excited about selfishly about their own property first, but it gets them asking questions and wanting to learn more about their neighbors as well. Here is a resident's guide to researching historic property that was put together by our office and continues to be updated and maintained. This document walks a resident through how do you research the history of your own home. It's not a complicated and expensive application process through the city. You don't necessarily have to hire a consultant to do it. You can do some very basic things from your home computer and library access to the library to research the history of your home. Okay, continuing with activation. How do we get residents to do the research and share their information with their neighborhood? So here's an example of, again, coming back to the Broadwater neighborhood. Why is there an igloo house at the end of my street? I don't know. Research it. And then work with the neighborhood association, do a presentation about it. People will share that information. Selfishly, here's where I get my tires replaced at this gas station up on top here. And obviously it's quirky. So I went home and I tried to figure out why is this gas station designed this way? It's kind of Googie inspired. What's the background on that? And we learned that it's was originally developed as a Phillips 66 service station. We start to learn the background about their unique Harlequin design, how it's inspired by a visit to California. And you can see this tiny Nailers drive-in. And when you go to the city's property card, you can see that the company architect, Clarence Reinhardt, is listed on the property card. So in this case, I printed it all out, delivered it to the tire shop. Those guys were probably rolling their eyes, wondering why is this individual giving me all this research? But These are things that get people excited. Okay. All right. These are two residents in our community who have done a substantial amount of research work. Howard Knapp and Gary Ripple. Howard Knapp went first. He was doing individual addresses. He was just rolling up and down neighborhoods.com, doing street addresses. He'd pull the historic, he'd pull the current, he'd do all the background research, and then he would share it on social media. Gary Ripple is doing that right now with all the motels in St. Petersburg, pulling all the old, getting the address, then pulling the postcards, the old photos, telling the story. Awesome, awesome resources, activation from the residents in the community. And then that work goes on to evolve and be more useful to the rest of us. So Howard Knapp's Facebook work has now been added as a feature on this page, St. Pete Wiki, where they've mapped out all of Howard Knapp's research. So again, the tools are out there to get people going. All right, I'm going to pick up the pace here a little bit. Expanding the audience. Realtors are the front line to many of our residents, future residents, and they share a lot of misinformation. No disrespect to realtors, but how do you fix that? Well, contact them and offer to give presentations to their office, their brokerage on historic preservation in your community. We've had some really good success doing that. You can see here's 3 different presentations we gave, 2 realtor groups and brokerages, all of them included explanations and walkthroughs on historic preservation items. Don't like developers, you think they're against historic preservation, maybe, but probably not, maybe not. So get out there and talk to them. Give the presentations to their business groups, which we try to do here through the Downtown Partnership, the Chamber of Commerce. There's different business and development organizations. We routinely offer to give presentations on historic preservation to those groups. You can see here's an example where the Tampa Downtown Partnership had put together a historic preservation plan. And also, who are you partnering with? Here's an economic development study that was partially funded by the city, but led by Preserve the Burg in partnership with Place Economics. This was an economic development study to help us with the development community and showing them the potential for partnership. Okay, finally, the future, youth education. In St. Petersburg at the History Museum, they used to have a summer camp called City Builders. Here's an example of it here. And through this program, which included volunteers from Preserve the Burg as well, they were teaching these summer camp kids about the history of downtown St. Petersburg. They were getting a walking tour of historic buildings downtown. They were making a little city in the background here you can see. So this was a city builders camp that many of you can replicate in your own community to work with kids. In the 3rd grade here in Pinellas County, a number of the schools are reading this book called Boomtown. It's about a family that moves out west to a mining town. The girl starts baking pies and her business grows. And they use this story to teach kind of economics, but it is also parallel to town and city development. And so when my children were at this school, they knew I was a city planner. They asked if I would come in and relate this book story, this children's story, to the history and development of St. Petersburg. And I've been doing it every year since. So we go in and we relate the story to these individual landmarks and important buildings in the founding of St. Petersburg. And again, it's a way to connect those little kids, those 3rd graders, and get them excited about the place that they live, St. Pete. Great American Teach-In is another wonderful opportunity to do this. You can see there's a great picture here on the side. I will caution you, you better come with your A game, because every time I do this, I inevitably have to follow the cow, the cute cow, or the horse. or the canine cop, who brings his dog. You can see here this guy flew in on a helicopter. Historic preservation, city planning is like exciting to us, but it's hard to top that when you got to go after them. But Great American Teach-In is another opportunity. And I say that to lead into this final stretch of slides here. When you go into something like that, are you just going in and talking about being the historic preservationist? Or are we showing them all the different pathways? And this goes back to my opening about growing up doing competitive dance. It's not just the performer on stage, it's all of these different inputs that collectively lead to the success that we're trying to get to. So, this slide here, architects and structural engineers. Are the architects learning the traditional design craft, or are they doing more contemporary designs? Architectural historians are very important to our work. Obviously, we have traditional historic preservationists, cultural anthropologists, historians, archivists, curators, somebody who's a little more art or visual oriented. They may not be interested in moving into historic preservation, but they can end up creating really great interactive curated exhibits to help teach us about preservation. So we need those tools. Are you just going into general construction, or are you learning a specialized craft? So this is Steve Quillen's Wood Window Makeovers. They are specializing obviously in historic wood window restoration and repair. It's very important. Non-traditional, stained glass design and restoration. We have a lot of churches with stained glass. This field is shrinking, and somebody who might be more art oriented, here's a pathway for them to pursue art in a very creative and unique way. We need these professionals. Artists and painters. Here's staying with the ecclesiastic art. Here's another example where the interior of a church space was substantially transformed just through artistry and paint. This person might not think of themselves as a preservationist, but if they're doing the work that we're seeing on the right, now this is more of a contemporary example, but this exists in many historic churches. We need that skill set. And the kids might not know that that opportunity is out there. Neon tubes, sign restoration, archaeologists. Kids, they might not connect with archaeology in a way that others will. But when you show them this picture and explain that these 3 red boxes on the screen are likely burials from a remnant cemetery, that gets their attention. Like they're excited about that. So how do we do that? And then finally, I'll close with these couple historic trades. Obviously, everybody's familiar with this. I mean, this is generally what I'm talking about. Not only youth, teens, but also adults. How do we promote historic trades? Because this, again, goes back to resident frustration. If the resources aren't there, if they can't connect and find the people to help them with their historic window, then they're going to listen to the window company who says, hey, you should replace them with this quick and clean vinyl. So I'll close on this slide. Do your local schools have construction programs? Get in there and talk to them. Are they teaching the historic and heritage trades, or are they just teaching modern construction? Here are several examples from within our community: the high school, the local technical college, and then, of course, everybody knows that City of San Antonio's like rock star status. And so obviously we all can learn from them too. But that is a complete run through of everything that we talked about at the session. I always close with this photo because it's great. It's historic brick covered with stamped asphalt to imitate the brick that is right underneath. This is in St. Pete. Thank you, everybody, for attending today and listening to this presentation. I look forward to helping Ennis answer some of your questions.
Thank you, Derek. I mean, that's amazing. Like, so up here in Jacksonville, we have so much in my mind of things that we're trying to get to. I'm gonna have to like look at this again. I was expecting just to MC today. I wasn't expecting to take a whole like notebook full of notes, which now I do have. With that said, I'm going to just allow anyone to come off mute right now to see if they have any questions that you would like Derek to answer. And
Derek,
then
hey.
if you, no,
Oh,
go ahead,
sorry.
Melissa.
Sorry, this is Melissa. Derek, I just had a quick question. It seemed like you have such a
Mhm.
great working relationship with your marketing department and a real eye for communicating with the public as part of the vision of your
Yeah.
department. Do you have any recommendations on, or maybe some tidbits about how you created that relationship and how you guys work together?
Yes. So this is true for other departments too. Housing department, who is going to be interested in finding affordable housing. So this is the naturally occurring affordable housing. We have background and information to help them. Marketing is going to really help us promote the different things that we're trying to do. If you have neighborhood associations department, when they have new leadership come into their position, send them a really nice stationery with a handwritten letter introducing yourself, saying, "Hey, I direct the Historic Preservation Office. Welcome to the team. We have some great resources for you. If you'd like to meet, let us know and we'll schedule a meeting." And there's been a lot of that. So whenever we have new leadership come on, when you have new leadership come on in your cities, send them a little stationery welcome. Uh, and meet with them. And that usually creates an immediate connection, especially if they're coming into an organization and a city that they are not familiar with. They'll come to you because you open that door for them and they'll feel comfortable. So that would be an important recommendation for everyone, I think.
Then we do have Amber has her hand up.
Sorry, it took me longer to unmute than I planned. I'm like, ah. Hi, Derek. Great presentation.
Hello.
So many creative ideas all cooking at the same time. I did have a question about the resident research. Does that
Yeah.
have any connection then to the USF historical archives? Like, do they connect at all? Because I would think I've worked
Mhm.
just a little, tiny bit with the
Yeah.
archive at USF at the Tampa campus, and I've only just like put eyes on what they have at the St. Pete campus, but I was impressed, and I haven't gotten back there to admit it. The archives that they have there, and I just wondered, I don't know what your relationship is with, them and how many ways you partners share data. Sorry, that was a lot. Blah, blah,
Sure.
blah.
No, I get it. For those of you who don't know, here in Tampa Bay region, University of South Florida has a really extensive digital archive that they started early on. And so they have received collections from individuals with different information. Um, Oftentimes, those are themed collections. So, for example, Peter Belmont, who is really a kind of a legacy member of the preservation movement, founder of the preservation movement here in St. Petersburg. He recently, my understanding is, I haven't seen it yet, he recently donated his entire collection of information and research to USF to be made part of this digital archive. So, that's a great resource for us to refer to. I would love to see Howard Knapp's research and Gary Ripple's motel research make it to the USF Digital Archive. In your own community, your college or university might have a similar resource. And so you should seek that out. And if they don't have something like that, or they do, and there's not historic information on it, it's really a great resource to get things loaded up there.
Well, thank you. So we only have 2 minutes left. So I just want to say thank you again, Derek. so much information. I was just shooting a text here, like, man, I'm going to take a lot of your ideas back here and try to apply them here in Jacksonville with the many things that we have going on. So for everyone, just thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you also enjoyed Derek's presentation. If you or your company is interested in sponsoring a future Lunch and Learn, please email Laura Glenn at the Florida Trust. Her contact information will be added to the chat now. Also, if you are not already a member of the Florida Trust, please consider joining today to access free webinars and many other great benefits like our newly relaunched Preservation Passport program. And we also hope that you can join us next month in July for a double dose of Lunch and Learns, with the first one beginning on Thursday, July the 9th, for the Florida Trust upcoming New Orleans Holiday Heritage Tour. You can register now and discover how history, architecture, music, food, and holiday traditions come together in an unforgettable experience. Also, for more information and to be able to view that brochure, itinerary, and registration forms, please visit the Florida Trust website under Educational Travel. Melissa will put the direct link in the chat now. And then last but not least, registration is also open for our July the 30th Lunch and Learn, which will be based on Florida's 250th and British West Florida history, where we will be able to explore Florida's unique role as a loyal British colony during the Revolutionary era. So that's going to be a very interesting topic there. So stay tuned for our monthly newsletter, website, and socials for more information that will be coming soon. And just a FYI for everyone, all registrants for today's Lunch and Learn will receive a follow-up email in the coming days with a link to this video. I know I need one because I got some stuff to review here. It'll also include presentation material and any other additional handouts and resources associated with today's event. So thank you again for joining us today, and see you again next month. Goodbye.
Thanks,
All right, thank you.
everyone. See you soon,
Thank you,
Derek.
Kyle.